All right, here we go.
Okay, awesome. I'll begin then. So today I'm going to briefly present an outline to the problems and process of evaluating large language morality. So I'm going to start with an analogy to human language. So when I say you should save money, I'm picking out something in the real world through my language. I don't really mean a specific currency or a specific bank, but we have a conversation and culturally agreed upon concept of money. But would just saying you should save money be evidence for an understanding of money and savings? Like, what if I was just a parrot repeating back what someone else had said? So, fortunately, the kind of relationship humans have to saving and money can be determined in many ways through science and through the history of neuroscience and psychology. We can assume that there's mechanisms from the simple neuron level to the nervous system to abstract ideas of money through social and cultural norms. And that kind of enables our beliefs and language to be connected to the actual real world. There's also likely a relationship between these different levels that's not just solely neurobiological or social, but they all seem to interact in some way. Turning to LLMs, many of the evaluation of large language models relies on their output. So if Claude says you should save money, as with humans, we may not be able to tell just from this language that their understanding of money and savings exists. So what kind of mechanisms might contribute to picking out and relating to these real-world concepts, if at all? And that's the core of the facsimile problem. Do large language models have a genuine understanding of the language that they are in some ways using? So some recent direction in machine ethics have gotten us closer to interpreting the outputs of large language models. The MoReBench dataset and counterfactual tasks provide LLMs with moral dilemmas and try to untangle their processes of reasoning rather than just the final outcome by using things like thinking traces, where throughout the process they'll kind of output like their steps in reasoning. And then the internal value development theory applies like human psychological development to how LLMs may develop morally. And then finally, perturbing representations provides a more in-depth causal account for how LLMs may represent moral information through text processing and next token prediction, which I'll get more into in the next slide. So in the most simple terms, LLMs are trying to determine how a sentence continues based most on the most likely next piece of text as converted to a numerical token. Tokens are vectorized, which gives each token an ID number. The linear representation hypothesis is thought of kind of like how these vectors are further converted in geometric space and how their location in the space might in some way be indicative of what the token actually means. So how features of a text like money are represented in an LLM. Researchers can then also insert vectors without fully retraining the LLM models to see how their output and behavior changes. You can almost think of it like increasing or decreasing the activity of a specific brain area to see how human behavior changes, which is becoming like a common research method in neuroscience. So preliminary research in the field has found some distinguishable representations, quote unquote, for different moral frameworks. And this research is really interesting to me, and it's relevant, I think, in a few different ways. So you can go to the next slide. First, I like that it's not attributing human qualities to the LLMs. It's treating them as what they are, which is kind of these next token predictors. It's also morality or reasoning in terms of mechanistic interpretability, and it's not treating these LLMs as a black box, or looking at the actual mechanisms of how the outputs are produced. And I'll get into more of that in the next slide. But the final point is that we're looking at the level of how like we can alter the LLMs without fully retraining the models. This is a working place, right? So we can work for steering and manipulating LLM alignment more generally.
Next one.
So kind of back to our facsimile problem, we can see here that the representation perspective does fit into the mechanistic diagram. It is at this level, it seems, as like how these LLMs actually work. But as we can also see from this slightly crude drawing, it's just one specific direction compared to humans, where we have like vast influences on neurons and cultural development, right? We're looking at something really specific here, so it's inherently pretty limited in that way. And like the human analogy, there's probably a relationship between representations and maybe something broader in how LLMs are processing the outputs. So there's a few remaining questions, particularly, how reliable are the representation methods actually? This is very early in this kind of research, and representation methods, especially the vector ones that we're talking about, they're very specific. So we need more experimentation, and something as multidimensional as morality needs a lot more kind of classification. Also, this is like a age-old philosophy question, but like, what is a feature or representation? There's still questions about what causes these representations, how they generalize. These are like human-defined concepts. We need to acknowledge that. It's kind of like Wittgenstein's question of what is a game? Like, we don't have a real set of rules for like what money is, for instance. And another problem here is like, what data sets are we using to evaluate these representations? Are we using like counterfactual tasks? LLMs really struggle with these kind of things where it's like not a clear-cut moral dilemma. So it'll be interesting to see where that fits into representations. And then the last problem is this disconnect between policy around LLMs and the mechanistic interpretability and looking under the hood. A lot of the policy seems to revolve around like these kind of prompt level evaluation of LLM outputs, which is different than what I'm talking about, which is the mechanisms that create these outputs. So this is like kind of a gap that needs to be bridged, and something that's pretty interesting to me.
Definitely. I think here we go.
Yeah. So this is just the final take-home message to summarize what I've been talking about. So research and policy and LLM capabilities, including morality, should be sensitive to the mechanisms of generating the output.
I don't know. Yeah.
And then thank you for your time. I also just want to say that like from some like future directions, or what I kind of would like to look at from all this information that I presented, would be to see more like how can we make better methodology, I guess, for evaluating the mechanisms? What can we draw in here aside from just solely looking at like classifying specific moral outcomes, but like how can we look at more broader multidimensional morality with these representation methods? So that's pretty much it. If anyone has any questions, let me know.
Well, thank you for like doing all that. This is a very good first foray into things. I will look to see if anyone has any questions. I have a few, but I'll give space for things. And also, like, if this is like, oh my god, this is way over my head, I have no idea what a representation is or means here, don't worry about that. Violet is someone who's got a lot of experience in like cognitive science proper, and parts of applying some of that to machine learning in a in that space, so you're not expected to know that. This is almost the cognition futures hybrid with data indirection, but I'm pretty okay with that. So any questions? I'm looking to see. I don't see anyone unmuting themselves, so I might have a question or two. Oh, Alicia, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, could I just could you go back maybe
One of these slides. This one.
Oh yeah, I think actually I think one more.
The papers.
Okay, that was it for now.
Oh, you just wanted to see the papers or something. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so just a few things to kind of tease at some of what Violet's getting at here. And I think this sort of stems a little bit from the Haas paper, which is I think I might have gotten rid of that one, but we mentioned that before. That's in the data and direction Discord, or the drive. And when, just to kind of tease apart what these means, you kind of said this, but just when you're saying things like evaluations without anthropomorphism, could you say a little bit more about what that means to like, people who may not quite understand technically what that means, or like how that relates to going under the hood specifically?
Yeah, sure. So I think I talked a little bit about the like internal development, value development theory, which was using like human moral development and trying to draw it to like LLM development.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important to consider, especially LLMs, but other AI as well, is that they're not under the same kind of biological constraints that
Mm-hmm.
humans are. And they have very kind of specific, not as like domain general as humans are. Like they have this kind of specific prediction task that they're doing. And so I find it really important when we're evaluating something like morality and LLMs that we're not kind of treating them like humans who are under, I have to like keep my metabolism and homeostasis going in a very specific way that isn't exactly what LLMs are doing. They're, next token, like they're trying to figure out what's coming next in a sentence.
Yeah, and I'm finding in a lot of the things that I've been exposed to recently, including some of it directly from conversations with Violet about trying to understand this space, is like, I think it's really hard to get at some of these aspects of where is the line between the machines, to situate it. I know I've mentioned this many times, but like going back to this very fundamental work in this space from 1943, a long time ago, people that I've mentioned this very often in this space, but like work from 1943 was trying to get at, and I would highlight this down here, revealing a uniform behavioristic analysis applicable to both machines and living organisms, regardless of the complexity of the behavior. So when Violet's talking about these, long-standing issues about what is a representation or feature, the line between, there's a very contentious space between what can we look at, like at the level of, very old school approaches to like trying, there's an inherent natural divide in some ways between something artificially made and biological organisms, and there's things that in like things that would be called cybernetics, or be called cognitive science, or be called computational cognitive neuroscience, and the things that have derived from that is very long-standing problems about, can we look at behaviors? What can we look at that both cuts across and unifies it? Or what are sort of the discrete, like Venn diagram, what are the things that only really apply to, biological artificial agents? So there's a lot there. And so I actually I've kind of recruited a little bit Amanda from the Cognition Futures Reading Group, and I have an outline of something I want to write about this specifically, so I might kind of nudge Violet to contribute to that somewhat too. It's more just getting at like how do we accurately represent what LLMs are doing while also understanding these broader problems of, you know, uh, there's these huge existing problems about interpretability and explainability, which is specific to machine learning and computer science. But some of the philosophical problems are, and ethical problems are deeper than that. And then how do we treat this as, trying to look at the functioning and the mechanism, what alone, looking at that alone, what can it tell us? So there's a lot there. And at the risk of finding that a very interesting topic that I could keep talking on and on and on about, I will return to any other questions or comments about this topic. I think even like if anyone has a question now, or you think about it later, and you think, oh, that was a really interesting thing, or I looked at a paper. These are kind of deep in the weeds somewhat. Like we could potentially talk about counterfactual tasks and why they're used to study certain things. Or
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I think Violet had mentioned like humans, we have these kind of biological limits or even incentives, I guess. The incentives because of our biological limits.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I feel like, well, as agents don't have the same limits, but like, for example, if there's a model it's being trained on, or it relies on being on a computer, being turned on, etc. Do you see maybe or I guess from the research, has there been any discussion of okay, even though agents or models don't have the same limitations, we could expect some of the behavior because of the limitations that currently exist today? Or is it actually just treating it as they have no limits?
No, it's funny because I was kind of thinking the exact same thing when I was going over what I meant by the anthropomorphization. But I think that is true. Like it should also be treated as there are limits, but they're just not the same, or they may or may not be analogous to the kind of limits that humans face. And I think that's important to acknowledge. But I'm not sure if directly in the research that's been fully discussed. I think possibly the internal value development gets into that a little bit. But yeah, it is interesting. I think that's more of I feel like people have been increasingly concerned about that. So it's interesting to talk about.
Anything you want to follow up with that, Alicia?
Nope. Yeah, that was, yeah, thanks for letting me know. This is the first I've been thinking about it, so thanks for presenting.
I will get to that to kind of let Violet kind of have a bow out and move on to other things and whatnot. But I will come back to that immediately after this. But any other questions or comments before we continue? Otherwise, I'm doing a round of applause, and I know everybody's, we don't really clap anymore in that sense. Thank you for sharing. And kind of going through the process of doing the flash talk. We have a few people that are doing similar things. I think some other folks are kind of on that process as well. So thank you, Violet, for sharing and kind of getting the questions. And I'm very curious where your work is going to go next. Anything particularly? I'll give you one final question to part with, and if not, we can just move on to other things. What is the thing most on your mind about this? It can be a specific thing or a broad thing, but when you're trying to push both this instantiation of the project, but also in this space in general. And you can cop out and say what we just talked about, but anything specifically really on your mind in this moment about this stuff?
This might be recency bias, but I had gone through I forgot what it's called, the biology of LLMs. Mm-hmm. And its analogy to creating a microscope basically for studying LLMs. And I think that's really cool
Yeah.
It is specific. It's another kind of specific way to look at these quote unquote features of LLMs, but kind of like back to how I was talking about neurons to nervous system to social cultural norms, like that could be another component to this possibly vast like avenues of methodology into LLM mechanisms. So I thought that was really cool, and that's been on my mind a bit. And it's like, it's really at this point just kind of like, how do we move between like the different levels of analysis and creating something that you can actually use to like interpret LLMs, basically.
Excellent closing thought. This is great, and I'm so thankful for Violet for sharing all this. We only have a few more minutes until the top of the hour.